For this and the next week, we are taking a look at the role and perception of Buddhism in Korea in paranormal context. Followers of my channel should know very well the undeniably large presence of shamans and shamanism in paranormal matters in Korea, but those who paid close attention might have also noticed Buddhist monks occasionally appear in the similar role in some stories. Monks in those stories are somewhat more elusive, authoritative, but subtle, compared to somewhat more forceful, brassy, and scary shamans as they are often portrayed in these type of stories. Yet, their role is unmistakably overlapping the role of shamans, namely that of a clairvoyant, fortune teller, and exorcist. Now, the official stance of Buddhism does not condone or encourage paranormals, nor it's anyway true that every Buddhist monk possesses a paranormal insight and power. But as the paranormal stories floating around proves, in general public's mind at least, Buddhism and monks are not far away from paranormal matters. As I see it, there are several reasons for that. One is that Buddhism is an ancient religion in Korea. It's thought to be first introduced in Korea around 4th century, and for the following 10 centuries it served as the national religion. At its peak of power, the religion took on more aristocratic and nationalistic characters, and its figureheads were sometimes associated with almost magical power that could vanish evils and even foreign invaders. In the late 14th century, with the new Joseon dynasty, Buddhism lost its powerful position. Confucianism, that the new kingdom was based on, didn't put value in religious matters. Nevertheless, for most ordinary people, Buddhism remained one of the only options to turn to when a spiritual issue rose, whether it be religious or paranormal. Two, it's both shamanism and Buddhism are not tightly dogmatic. Well, especially shamanism. Having no set scriptures or governing body, the flexibility always has been the key for Korean shamanism to survive into the modern time. Over their long history together, shamanism freely adopted many concepts and words of Buddhism. The spiritual worldview that is governed by the Jade King, for example, is originated from Buddhism, but by now it's almost universally adopted in shamanism too. Many shamans claim that they serve Buddha along with other shamanic gods. Some even take on the look and image of a Buddhist monk. For Buddhism's part also, through the long coexistence in the history, some of the shamanism or folk religion element seeped into it. Buddhism itself is a religion of tolerance and also lacks the tight organizational control as from Vatican in Catholicism or pretty assertive evangelical American Protestant. Many Buddhist temples in mountains, for example, would have a dedicated shrine for the guardian god of the mountain as a sign and acceptance of the local religion. Overall, for the people who don't have deep understanding, the distinction between shamanism and Buddhism can be a bit blurred at places. So, I collected a few bizarre paranormal stories where Buddhism, Buddhist monks, and Buddhist temple play an important role. I once again emphasize that I'm not dealing with Buddhism as religion here, but merely the public perception of the religion in paranormal matters. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by host, Anthony. About 5 years ago, I happened to stay at a Buddhist temple in Yangsan, Gyeongsang Province. It wasn't just any temple, but a monastery for female monks. Visits and stay there was strictly limited, but I was granted a few nights because it was for the research project I was then working on. My room was naturally well separated from the monks' quarter. The temple was quiet with very few visitors, even during the day, so the sheer silence and emptiness felt only stronger at night. I couldn't help but feeling a bit creeped out, so the first night I slept with a light on in the room. At breakfast, the head monk said she saw the light kept on in my room and asked if I couldn't sleep well. Well, I get easily scared. The wind was so high last night I couldn't sleep well, I said. The monk smiled and said, "We are in the arms of merciful Buddha. There's nothing to fear." "Oh well, it's just me lacking the faith," I said. "If wind should scare you already, I think this story would give you a heart attack," she said, and told me an old story that every monk in the temple knew. Back in the days, on the top of the mountain where the temple is located was an Air Force base. So monks on the way to and from the temple occasionally ran into soldiers. One day, 2 monks were on their way back to temple late at night. Their leisurely pace was soon caught up by 2 young soldiers who'd been walking up in much quicker pace. Now, they 4 became companions in this midnight hiking, chatting away with each other. About the midpoint, they took a break to catch breath. 2 monks didn't waste that short moment and took meditation sitting on the rock. But as soon as they reached down the deeper state of meditation, soldiers cried out, "Oh, where are you gone? They disappeared all of a sudden." Monks realized only then that these soldiers were not humans, but wandering lost souls. When monks' ego melted away in deep meditation, these ghosts lost the sight of them. Monks were surprised, but kept their calm and waited till the ghosts moved away. The head monk finished her story with her signature smile, but I must say her story kept me from sleeping for the rest of the stay at the temple. I guess the head monk saw my anxiety, and as I bade goodbye at the end of my stay, handed me a small bookmark with a famous saying from a Buddhist scripture, saying, "Everything is born out of your mind," that my fearful thoughts made me more fearful. I hope that's right. But what about that story? It was summer 2006. I remember it as a particularly hot summer, probably because I was serving in the military then. That day, I was on the gatekeeping duty. My military base was rather close to a town nearby. To be able to watch townspeople getting on with their civilian life helped a little to pass the time at least. Then I saw an old Buddhist monk walking up towards the base gate, sweating buckets. As usual, I had to stop him, informing that further up was an army base and limited area. The monk laughed nonchalantly and bowed with his palms together. My family is Buddhist, so I quickly bowed back, palms together. The monk smiled and said, "You seem to know a thing or two about Buddhism," and then sat under a nearby tree, saying, "Phew, it's a hot day. Let me just cool down a bit here." There was something about him, as it sometimes can be with a monk with a high level of insight and clarity. I got curious. "What brought you this way?" I said. "Well, just as I go, my feet lead me," he said, and then glanced directly at me. "Do you know where you are from?" I usually don't like to talk about myself, but I somehow felt like the conversation to flow on. "I was born in Korea Gyeongsang province," I said. No, I'm not talking about your birthplace. I mean, your root.
Did nobody tell you about that?
He said, keeping the straight stare at me. I don't think I understand what you mean, I said.
I've never seen anyone like you. Did nobody mention anything really, even from your childhood?
I started feeling a bit odd. Probably my mother told me something when I was little, but I don't remember it clearly.
You are born with a heavy karma. I'm afraid your life wouldn't be a smooth sail.
Well, isn't it a typical line of a con shaman or fortune teller? I didn't want to show my distrust outright, so I just said, well, I'm not so sure. The old monk sat there quietly a while longer, and said before he moved away,
Your current life is on a lawn. Think it as a gift, and take care of it well. You're now walking on a tightrope, on a night blade. Likely to see some blood. I only pray that you walk on safely.
He bowed to me with his palms together one last time, and walked away. I just laughed and didn't think much of it. A month later, I got shot by a misfire. All I remember is the deafening noise and the deathly pain that followed. After a major surgery, I lost the most function of one lung, but pulled through. It took a few weeks till I could move by myself, and sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, I suddenly remembered the old monk and what he told me. Once I started pondering about it, I couldn't unthink it anymore. I was discharged once I recovered, and as soon as I got back home, I told Mom about the encounter with the old monk and asked if she knew what it was about. She sighed deep and said, You know I visit the temple every year to offer 108 bows to the Buddha, don't you? It's for you, my dear. When you were little, 5 years old, you almost died with fever. At the time I was already told that you were born with a precarious fate, that death and misfortune was written all over it, and it was better to just let you go. But how could I as a mother? I prayed then for a mercy on you, and I'm keep praying ever since. It left me shocked. Later I also sought a fortune teller, only to be confirmed of what the monk and Mom said, that I was born with a particular misfortune. I barely survived when I was 5, thanks to my Mom's earnest faith and prayer, but would never be free of the weight of the doom and karma, affecting even the people around me with my misfortune. I was left depressed a while. I managed to get on by visiting various temples and offering prayers. One day on such a visit to a temple, I ran into the old monk again. He came to me as soon as he saw me and grabbed my hands.
How grateful to see you alive and well. Please do not blame your fate, for life is a gift under any circumstances. That's the only way to live beyond the fate. Keep well, young man. Keep well,
he said, and quickly walked away. It all happened too quickly, and only a few seconds later I started following the direction where he went away, but I could not find a trace. I stopped another monk passing by and asked if he knew such and such old monk. The monk's face turned dark and asked me once again where I saw him and if I was sure. After a pause, he finally said,
"It sounds like you met my mentor, Master Hyunwoo. He passed away 2 years ago."
When I was a high school student, I lived in a Buddhist temple in the mountain for a time for some family issues that I'm not going into detail now. Anyway, it was my job then to get the fresh water from the spring. It was to be offered to Buddha at the morning prayer, which meant I had to do it at 3 in the morning. Thank God the spring was not that far from the temple. Of course, there usually shouldn't be a soul around at that time of the day, but that morning, a guy suddenly popped out from nowhere when I got to the spring. It was so unexpected that I think I kind of just froze there a while. The man walked past me saying, "It should be quite a job to wake up this early." But I couldn't even respond anything. The encounter left me shaken, so I hurriedly filled up the bottle with fresh water and ran all the way down to the temple. There was a lamp post at the gate of the temple, and I made a pause there to catch my breath. And from my peripheral vision, I saw somebody standing next to me. I was so startled I almost shouted the F word. "I guess you live in this temple?" The smiling voice was the same voice as from the man I ran into at the spring. Under the lamplight, I could finally get to see the face clearly, and he looked somewhat hazy, like he was an image from a projector. This time, too, I was too shocked to respond to anything. I barely managed to put the fresh water at the main hall and sneaked back under the duvet, shivering. The monk who shared the room with me too sensed something was up with me and just told me to take it easy and warm myself up. Soon the sound of chant and ticking of wood block for the morning prayer rang, which calmed me down a bit. So I went to the main hall to join in. The morning prayer that day was specially to wish for a peaceful passing of a recently deceased. And I recognized the photo of the dead. It was the guy I ran into just earlier. I passed out there and then. I later explained what happened to the abbot and was excused from the spring duty for the time being. For the following 4 days, I hardly got out of my room, sleeping most of the time. I think the trauma was so grave. Even now, I shiver a little bit as I recount the morning. Master Songchul is considered the most famous and important figure in Korean Buddhism who set the tone and direction of the religion in the post-war era. There are countless amusing quotes and anecdotes about him, especially for his typical Zen riddle manner of communication. As you can see in the following story, some even verge into the paranormals. Most of them are not a part of official or proven history, but a made-up story taking the advantage of Songchul's fame. And I believe the following story is one of them. Nevertheless, it's in the same vein as the mythical stories about historic Buddhist masters. It's an anecdote from the 70s, shortly after Master Songchul became famous nationwide. One morning, Master Songchul was about to have his breakfast when he sensed restless energy from the outside. He opened the door to the courtyard and found a man in a clean suit but pale and skinny. As soon as the man saw the face of the master, he just fell on his knees and pleaded his case. "I'm the firstborn son of the family, and responsible of my household. One day I came back from a long business trip abroad, and something had gone wrong meantime. From distant relatives to cousins, they all started falling ill one by one, and now my own wife and children are ill, as well as myself. We of course sought medical help, but none could really diagnose or cure us. We got so desperate and even called in shamans, but they would just look around and run away that it was beyond them. One of them directed me to this temple, but I had no idea that she meant none other than Master Songchul himself. Songchul quietly looked into the man's face and suddenly showed a big smile.
Go back home now. Everything will be fine.
The man wondered, but trusted the master's word and went back his home. That night, he was woken up by weird noises from the outside. He opened the door to the garden and there was a hellish scene unfolding. Countless dead people were struggling to get into his room. He was deathly scared, but soon realized they seemed to be all blocked by some invisible force. Then he recognized what these ghosts were saying.
Have a pity on us, Master!
Have a pity on us, Master! Just for once! Just for once!
And yet, they still failed to get inside. Soon, with a sound of lamentful moans, they started to disappear one by one, till none was left. As soon as the day broke, the man went back to Master Songchul to report about the bizarre experience. Songchul told him,
The plot your house was built on was a normal land, but the feng shui shifted over a long time, and there opened up a gate to hell. Living people could not stand living there, and that's why your family got ill one by one. I did a little trick to fend off all-consuming force of hell temporarily, but unfortunately a man can't manipulate feng shui. I'd advise you to find a new family home as soon as possible.
It's not my own story, but a friend recounted it as it happened to his relative. So make what you will. I myself believe it to be true. The father of that relative was a notorious delinquent when he was young. Let's call him Youngsu for the sake of the story. From the early age, Youngsu was already a spoilt brat and grew up into an unruly teenager that freely indulged himself in the world of drink, smoke, sex, and all that. His family was the richest in the region, and being the prince of the most powerful household, nobody, be it his teacher or even police officers, couldn't touch him easily. Anyway, one day, Youngsu and his mates skipped the class once again and went to a Buddhist temple in the local mountain. They weren't there to pray, of course, but to use the quiet space for their party. For the maximum effect, they didn't forget to pack a lot of drinks and pork belly to barbecue. For those who don't know, Buddhist monks don't drink or eat meat. The old abbot of the temple just tusked at them and just let them be. So the boys ate and drank into evening and fell asleep on the open floor. It gets chilly up in the mountain even in summer. When they woke up with the chills, it got already too dark to hike down. The delinquents broke into the main hall where the statue of Buddha were enshrined and used the cushions for the prayers to make their impromptu bed for themselves. But then, one of the boys suddenly stood up and walked into the mountain in a decisive manner and speed unlikely for a drunkard. Others got a bit baffled and caught him before he could walk further away. But then this boy now went into fits and convulsion. His mates didn't know what to do. It was way before mobile phones and they could not call for help either.
You sons of bitches!
Suddenly the abbot of the temple bursted in. Unlike earlier, he roared like an angry tiger. He then sat in front of the statue of Buddha and started chanting something to the rhythm of his wooden block, to which the boy's fit calmed down. The abbot came over to him, put his hand on his head, and handed him a string of beads to wear it on his wrist. The boy was now lucid, but started crying that he got a bad headache, so unbearably painful. The abbot said calmly, almost coldly,
I didn't mind you boys drinking and gorging on meat to work me up, but breaking into the holy space and disrespecting Buddha is a different matter. And now are you asking for help?
Other boys tried to calm their mate down, that they would go back to town as soon as the dawn broke. He would then get some painkillers and everything should be fine. But the boy kept crying, saying it wasn't that kind of headache. It was so bad, his head felt like breaking apart. Help me, help me. The abbot sighed and said,
There's nothing much I can do for you. Wait here a bit, I'll get help.
When he came back about an hour later, he was with an old lady who, as soon as stepped in the main hall, screamed,
What a mess! Get out! Get out of here! Right away!
When boys came out to the courtyard, the old woman then threw sea salt and atsuki beans at them, which stung on their skin. They thought that should be the damn old woman throwing them so hard at them, but apparently, when you're possessed by a ghost, these repellents feel particularly painful. After showering them with the salt and red beans, the woman walked up to the boy who was still crying, looked straight into his eyes and said,
I might be able to help others, but not you.
The desperate boy hung on to her.
It hurts so bad. Other guys are not even suffering anything. I'm dying, why won't you help me?
The boy whined.
If I helped you, I too would have to pay the price. I will die before my time,
the old woman said.
What are you talking about? Just help me, please.
Now the woman glared at the boy.
You should know better. What kind of blood runs in your family and you son of a traitor?
She spitted between her teeth. The boy dropped on the ground and bewailed.
But it's not me. It's not my fault.
Others didn't get what they were talking about. But later it turned out the boy's family was the direct descendant of a big traitor in the history who sold the nation to Imperial Japan for their own personal gains. The desperate and angry back and forth carried on into dawn, but in the end, boy's desperation seemed to win sympathy.
I must have gone soft with age,
the old woman grumbled, and then started massaging the limbs of the boy, chanting Buddhist scriptures. And like some miracle, the boy's headache was gone. The boy asked the name of his savior, but the woman said,
It will really finish me off if I told you my name. Just conduct yourself better from now on."
And then she turned to Yongsu now.
"Here's a prince of a rich family. You take the family fortune for granted, don't you? Not knowing it's all for the hard work and goodwill of your ancestors. Wake up and straighten up yourself, you dog!"
But I don't think her harsh warnings worked in the end, considering Yongsu's family lost all their fortune due to Yongsu's father and Yongsu's own misadventures. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. And if you did, you would be happy to know there will be the second episode on the same subject next week. I remember my grandmother was a typical quasi-Buddhist. She considered herself as a Buddhist, would visit the local temple on important occasions, but also saw no contradiction to pray to folk deities or sing a shaman either. I guess it's comparable to Catholicism in some parts of South America, where more folk religious elements and custom have seeped into Catholic faith, regardless of the approval from Vatican. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a thumbs up and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel. My channel is all about weird and paranormal stories from Korea, some more light-hearted and universal, and some more culture-specific. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. Buy Me a Coffee supporters enjoy an early access to my new video. Thank you. Until next Sunday, stay safe and take care.